Coming to you from the Windy City. Welcome to Let's Talk Shop, a podcast about all things cloud and enterprise tech. Listen to insights and guest interviews with IT thought leaders and professionals. Now, here's your host, Elias Khnaser.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Let's Talk Shop. My guest today, a friend, one of the best that I've seen in the industry, none other than Erin Chapple, Corporate Vice President of Microsoft Azure Core. Erin, it's great to see you again, and it's great to have you on the show.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me. It's great to be back here, and I love talking shop, so perfect podcast for us to be on.
That's awesome. So I want to start with your title. Since I've left Gartner, the title has changed on me a little bit. So it was Azure Infrastructure. It's Azure Core now. What are you responsible for? What's the change? Tell me a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I've been on an interesting journey, I would say, over the last few years since I left the Windows Server organization and moved into Azure and started really focused on the core compute aspects of our infrastructure, right? Virtual machines, containers, the control plane, that common. But, customers aren't just looking to consume compute, right? In fact, they're actually looking to consume and run their workloads in Azure. And that really is a combination of compute, network, and storage. And so those key pieces, along with our global region strategy, our availability zones, all of that foundation is the core of Azure. It's all of the things that, ultimately, we really want to be invisible in many ways to customers in order to power their workloads and ensure that they can bring whatever workload, whether or not it be a traditional workload, more of a specialized workload, all the way through to cloud native, that platform that provides that continuous service, right, across the infrastructure. That are the set of things that are in my purview from a product and design standpoint.
So I loved what you just said, by the way, because it's something that I've been using for a while now, which is making technology and business indistinguishable. So I love the fact that one of the things that you're trying to accomplish is make Azure invisible, so that it's just part of your business. It's not necessarily technology. It's just how you work. I think that's awesome.
Well, and I think when you're in the tech industry, it's easy, right, to get caught up in all the latest technology advancements and like what's new in the silicon and what are we doing, right, in terms of storage, and like all of those things are important in some sense. But customers, as they're thinking about consuming the cloud, what do they want to do? Like they want to focus on, right, their business, their workload, and spending the time, dedicating to how are they transforming what they're trying to accomplish in the business and from their customer standpoint. And so like that we need to think about what the interface is per se between the work that we're doing and what the customer is looking for. And I can talk to you, right, till I'm blue in the face about all of those underlying details. But at the end of the day, it really is what's the solution that we're providing from a customer standpoint, and how can they be assured that we are providing the best infrastructure for them to be able to accomplish what they want to do from a business standpoint.
I love everything that you're saying, and I had a question I was going to ask you a little bit later on, but you brought it up, so I'm gonna bring it up now. One of the things that's challenging for customers that I've been hearing for years, and this is not specific to Azure in particular, all the cloud providers, in my opinion, suffer from this, in that you continuously build new tools, new features, new capabilities. We're going to talk about Ignite in a second. I mean, you continuously are announcing all of these things. But it's kind of hard for customers to keep up with all of these tools that are used to build. Are you starting to give thought to how do we pivot from the small tools that are compounding to maybe mini SaaSes, and not necessarily a complete software as a service, but mini SaaSes that are geared for a specific industry? If I'm in manufacturing, it's very likely they're all needing and using the same things. Is that part of what's going on in the planning phase right now?
For sure. And that is in many ways the motivation behind the work that we're doing around the Microsoft industry clouds, right? Our industry approach is to take that horizontal solution areas that we have, including Azure, but beyond Azure, right? As you think about the different components of the Microsoft Cloud, and to create those vertical access pathways to accelerate the time to value for those industry customers, right? And we're not just doing this by ourselves. It often means we're leading with market-leading industry ISVs for a given customer industry, and we're combining their solution with the best of the Microsoft Cloud and wiring up those, all of those things that are possible in order to create value and, again, increase that time to value for customers. Our industry team is really interesting. They have a deep understanding of what are the customer capabilities that they need to have. How does the platform function? That combination of the ISVs, and then how do you even bring in the SIs and the integrators and solution providers in order to build that capability and capacity. So, a couple of examples of ISVs we're working with, Schlumberger for energy, using the HPC capabilities that we have underneath this, or FI for retail, using the Azure infrastructure, and I think we'll talk about it a little bit later, MEC and the solution that we're doing there. But all of this really helps, stack up and create those industry components that allow us to shorten that time to value and create those SaaS on-ramps, as you say, that really help address industry-specific pain points.
Yeah, and we had Corey Sanders on the show not too long ago. Shout out to Corey. I think he's doing a really good job with industries as well. But
he's leading the team that I'm talking about.
Yeah, he's really cool. He's awesome. Let me kind of bring this back a little bit to Azure Core. I'm going to call it Azure. I like Azure Core. So you're gaining market share, and that's awesome. Are you concerned at all about a potential looming recession? What's your advice to customers? Do you think customers are going to lean more into technology? What are your high-level thoughts here on that?
I think customers have just faced over the last number of years such an unprecedented amount of change, right? It seems like every 2-3 months, something new is being introduced. And, in that context, the cloud has been a huge benefit to customers, thinking about how they just bring the value of the cloud, whether or not that be the agility, right? Thinking about predictability of cost, all of those things go into what's fueling, in many ways, their digital transformation. And so I don't think that that's going to stop in any sense of the world. In fact, if you think about just the digital imperative that customers have to modernize, and then you pair that with not only what we're doing in the Azure core infrastructure, but the Microsoft Cloud as a whole, I think that creates a huge amount of differentiation for us, where customers can take advantage both of best of breed products as well as best of suite solutions across everything in the tech stack, whether or not that be security through to business applications, from the developer standpoint, how they think about taking idea to code and code to cloud, the work that we do across the infrastructure suite, into things like low code and pro code solutions. And so I think customers are really looking at how do we make it easier for them through such things as we talked about at the industry solutions, but how that they can consume that in a friction-free way that helps them, right, to accelerate their transformation. Now, while they're doing that, they're still concerned about cost, right? And they want to make sure that they are, making those investments in a way that is both leverages existing investments they have. That's where things like the edge and hybrid and being able to consume what you can do from cloud to edge really become important. But also, how are they thinking about running their workloads in the most optimized way, right? So work that we're doing around ensuring best price performance for Windows Server and SQL Server, and being able to take advantage of our hybrid benefit, and even extending that hybrid benefit on premises as you think about running AKS, our Kubernetes services on premises. And so, we're really thinking about that whole journey that the customer is on. What are the programs that we have? What are the solutions we provide? And then how are we working with the partner ecosystem in order to be able to have customers optimize what they're doing on top of the cloud? And so I don't think it's a matter of, is it going to be more or less cloud? It's going to be, what's the business scenario I have? How is technology, whether or not that is public cloud or cloud to edge, enabling me to do that? And how do I think about doing it in the most efficient way so that I can capitalize on the benefit while minimizing cost?
I agree. I agree 100%. And I'm also one of those that says I don't think there's anything that would slow down cloud in particular or the digital transformation in general.
Mhm.
I mean, we went through a pandemic, and I thought, when that thing started, because we didn't know what to expect, that it would slow things down. It had the opposite effect, right? Everyone used more cloud,
Yeah.
more digital, etc.
Yeah.
We're going through a war in parts of the world,
Mhm.
and I thought that would also slow it down. It actually accelerated that,
Yeah.
whether it's the supply chain or anything else. I think this recession, if we go through a recession, is going to be different. I don't think we've seen its impacts. I think technology, I know that there's a lot of analysts, and I don't want to get into earnings and stuff like
Mhm.
that are talking about, well, the clouds in general are going to slow down. I just don't see how that's going to happen. I agree with you 100%. And I love the fact that Microsoft is being cost conscious, at least on behalf of its customers, and help optimize. I think that that's a critical word that you used. And I do think customers need to learn how to optimize a little better, how
Mhm.
to use technology a little better. I think
Mhm.
that's crucial. But I just don't see how things would slow down in this day and age.
And I think we're maybe thinking about it in less of like a speed up and slow down and more in terms of what are customers trying to do?
Yeah.
Right. At the beginning of the pandemic, as you talked about, well, one might think that it could have quote unquote slow down. It was the business transformation
That's right.
scenarios that were accelerating, right? That transition to the cloud. And the cloud provided a set of capabilities that customers needed at that point in time, right? When they had to pivot. If you think about going on the move to online shopping and cart pickup and whatnot, like that was a new scenario that didn't exist pre-pandemic, or it did, but it wasn't at the same rate in some sense of prioritization. But as we've gone through the pandemic and over the last number of years, we're also realizing that it's not just cloud, right? That hybrid is super important, that multi-cloud is super important. And that's, again, not driven by, I think, a philosophy or even an approach. There's a set of benefits in the cloud and the cloud architecture that customers want to be able to leverage wherever they need it to. And their business scenarios, right? Think about, the rise of IoT devices that are generating data that exist on premises and needing to be able to do sort of local processing of that data and machine learning in order to optimize my business, and not wanting, right, to have that data go all the way to the cloud and have to round trip, but being able to do that. It's important that I have, right, that consistency and can leverage the assets and what I need on premises at the same time as taking advantage of cloud models and cloud architecture. And, that's where things like we've done with Azure ARC and really sort of extending those Azure services on premises become really important. But I think it's this continual evolution. And so, the thing that in my role is very critical is to make sure that I have that connection with customers, that I'm listening, right, to what are the patterns and what are the sort of trends that we're seeing, and then figuring out, right, how do we codify that, both in the platform, but also then, as we talked about earlier, into the industry solutions.
Yeah, and those are good points. And you mentioned a lot of technologies, a lot of things that a lot of customers are doing, but that's kind of a double-edged sword. So customers are challenged today. They've been challenged with finding the right skill sets, finding the right people that can actually execute on this strategy. I'm sure you're seeing it, you're hearing it from your customers. Is there a way for Microsoft to help? Like, how can you even help from a skill shortage perspective?
Yeah,
Technical.
well, I think Microsoft has multiple skilling initiatives for customers as well as partners, because I think it's not just the end customer, it's the ecosystem around. To both be certified on Microsoft technologies or to just improve their cloud fluency, right? Our focus is really on enabling individuals as well as organizations and those partners to learn in a way that's most aligned with their needs. It's not always one size fits all from a training standpoint. So we have a set of what I like to call snackable, free self-paced learning that's through the online Microsoft Learn platform.
Nuggets.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes, you just have that coffee break and you want to like have something to keep you entertained. But we also have virtual training days, right? We have live learning sessions that we deliver globally, where experts do that more classroom style skilling, because that's more sort of suitable to learning styles of some of our customers. And we also provide hands-on learning, right, for those who prefer to learn in a lab style. through all of these skilling initiatives, we've been able to reach millions of enterprise learners and drive millions of certifications across the technologies. And then our customers and partners are also supported by specialized Microsoft training experts and trainers, right, to tailor those skilling plans for the staff that they have within their organizations. So it's both the combination of that strong learning partner network and the content that we're creating in order to help customers with, right, this skilling transformation.
And I know this is not within your purview, but I have to ask, do you know if there's been an acceleration in customers leveraging those educational capabilities in the last year?
I think that's a great question. I unfortunately don't know the answer to that. But just if I think about the movement, I would assume, right, that is true, that is the case. But we'll have to follow up on that with an offline conversation.
I'll get the information. We are just a little bit after Ignite. There's been a ton of announcements around Azure. I'm curious about the ones that your favorites, or the ones that you want to highlight.
It's like they say, it's like you love all your children equally, right? And I think across the cloud infrastructure, there's just so much that's going on, right? Back to really the workload view on it and what customers are doing, right? We have everything from more, I would say, traditional lift and shift, type applications that are coming over the last number of years. We've seen more and more focus on mission critical applications and into the specialized workloads, and then all the way through to the cloud native capabilities that we're providing. And so it's hard. It's hard to choose in that sense. But maybe if I had to, if I had to pick a couple of things that I think, maybe from each of those segments that sort of that capture the investment that we're making. One of the things I'm really excited about are the new Azure virtual machines that we've introduced with Ampure's Ultra ARM-based processors. Right. So as customers are shifting to focus on those cloud native applications, they're looking for additional offerings that help them with scalability, with performance gains, with cost optimization. I think that fits back into the conversation we were talking about, like how do you consume more cloud, but do it in an efficient way. And so there's been a lot of interest that we've seen in our recently introduced Azure VMs that feature the Ampere Ultra-based ARM processors. Ampere Ultra is among the fastest of the ARM Neoverse-based processors available. And these processors operate at the highest frequency of any ARM-based processor for general purpose computing that's available in the cloud today. So a lot of customer momentum, but also partner momentum, really moving their solutions and building on top of this new VM offering in order to achieve that scalability and increased power efficiency, which overall helps from a sustainability point of view, which I think is top of mind for a number of customers today. So that's one. Maybe if I continue in that cloud native space, Kubernetes is just the adoption of Kubernetes over the last number of years has been staggering. And, while there is a set of simplicity around moving to container-based workloads, it can be challenging, right, to manage your Kubernetes clusters, especially in a distributed way. And so one of the other things that we've introduced is the Azure Kubernetes Fleet Manager. And that really helps to simplify cluster management and organization. And, it's a new service. It's in preview. It simplifies that multi-cluster management by enabling a centralized management of all clusters at scale. And so you can group any combination of Azure Kubernetes service clusters to really simplify those multi-cluster workflows, like workload propagation, multi-cluster networking. So I think that's really helpful to be able to you need a Kubernetes cluster to store configurations for placement, for policy, for networking. But, again, you don't want that complexity. And so how are we simplifying that? And it's available today in preview with our AKS service, but also you think about that as we think about our edge strategy and being able to support AKS on the edge, right? Being able to extend that over time as part of our overall hybrid offering. Maybe one other thing, just in the spirit of the optimization conversation that we were having earlier, and this isn't as much on the product capability standpoint, but in terms of the business model and sort of how customers think about engaging and being able to get the most for what they're the most for their money. So we announced Azure Savings Plans for compute, which is now generally available. And the savings plans help customers save across select compute services globally by committing to spend a fixed hourly amount. So for example, $5 an hour for 1 or 3 years. And that allows customers, as they select compute services around the world, their usage is covered by the plan at a reduced price. And that helps them get more value for their cloud budget. And what's nice about the plan is that they can just set the amount they spend each month. It'll automatically apply the savings regardless of the region, the instance series, or the operating system. And so it's simplifying that from a customer standpoint and again, giving them that predictability of cost. So I could go on.
No, I'm sure.
Are there any things that you were curious about?
I am curious about a bunch of things. I want to start with Azure MEC. Azure MEC is one that's interesting. I do want to ask maybe a simple question. What is the name going to change? Azure MEC just feels like a mouthful to me.
Well, yeah, multi-access edge computing, MEC. It just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? I think the likelihood of that name changing is probably low at this point in time, given more of the industry standard around it as well.
But so let's talk a little bit about that. So that's with AT&T, correct?
Mm-hmm. Well, so let's step back for just a second, right? Let's talk about the MEC scenarios, right? MEC scenarios are all about allowing enterprises and developers to deliver innovative, high performance, and low latency apps using enterprise 5G connectivity. And we have both a private MEC offering, right? That is installed sort of in the customer site, as well as a public MEC offering that, again, is through that partnership with the operators. So it depends on the scenario of choice, where the solution is running.
And private MEC is still it's private 5G.
In preview.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
What are the use cases that you're seeing? I know you touched a little bit on that, but what?
So let me give you a customer example. Let's talk about OCI. OCI provides and distributes hydrogen-based products like low carbon fertilizers, fuels, feedstock, agriculture to industrial customers worldwide. And so you think about the environment of the plant that they're in. When the workers come in the gate, they really need to enable a reliable, secure communication for those frontline workers that are on site. So they're using a solution. In this case, it's actually powered by Azure Private MEC in preview. The solution is Weavex and connected via the Azure Private MEC. The Weavex works as a communications hub. So all communications, notifications, access, data access, essentially everything from when the employee walks into the gate that they need to be safe and efficient to when they leave. That is all sort of powered from a communication standpoint through the Private MEC solution that they have.
How widely available is MEC with AT&T right now? Is it still being rolled out? Is it?
So our public MEC with AT&T is available in both Atlanta and Dallas that are generally available now. We have Detroit planned for the end of the year and New York early next year. And then again, we'll continue to expand our partnerships after that.
All right. And out of curiosity, are those mini Azure Stack deployments?
They are not. So the private MEC that we use is actually built on top of Azure Stack Edge now. Okay. And it has plans over time to use our Azure Stack HCI infrastructure to bring more flexibility in deployment. And the public MEC offerings are actually built on top of a scaled down version of our Azure infrastructure itself.
Got it. Okay. So I want to shift a little bit and talk about Azure regions. It's something I've been researching for many years, even when I was still at Gartner, something that's near and dear to my heart. I have to ask some questions. So Azure regions, we still have some regions that have availability zones. There are some regions that don't have availability zones. And if in the same geography, wherever there's a region that doesn't have availability zones, there's another region that has availability zones. So you've done a good job covering that spectrum, so to speak. But I'm curious, are there plans, for example, to convert those Azure regions, and there's still a lot of them that don't have availability zones, into use case specific regions, again, for maybe low latency, high bandwidth links. We're talking about maybe I'm a movie studio that requires rendering capabilities with Hadoop clusters. So turning it away from being a general purpose region to a use case specific region. Are there thoughts there, or are you just going to augment, or are you even going to do anything like that?
Well, I think, you need to step back and think about what are we hearing from customers in terms of what they want from their cloud providers, particularly around a region strategy. So when I talk to customers, the three things that are sort of top of mind for them when they think about their region strategy, one is data residency. Right, they're looking to meet the stringent data residency requirements, and for that, a full data center region is typically required. Right, a lot of if you moved, say, in a local zones direction, they're tied to real regions, so there's significant data transfer that happens back and forth that might cross country boundaries, and so I think that's important to consider. The second is service availability. Right. As you start to build out and think about what are you going to be able to depend on, you really need to ensure that you have both the service availability, and then I'll tie this to the third one, which is the availability of the cloud services that are in that region or that capability. And so the combination of those two is important, right? So in that, with 60 regions around the world, it's not just the regions, it's the 200 network pops. And, if you think about Azure, about 85% of the world's GDP is created within 25 milliseconds of a Microsoft data center region. That combined with, right, the hundreds of services we have in our data center regions means that customers have, right, the trust, the consistency, and the availability that they need. Now you talked, right, about sort of what we've been doing from an AZ strategy. We are building just a phenomenal number of AZs, but also, all our new data centers that launch in a 3 AZ configuration. That's how we grow and how we expand our regions. And more of our own services are actually built on that AZ architecture that we offer, right? And we offer AZs in every country now that we operate in. So customers really don't, we think, need to trade off between data residency and reliability options or service availability options. Now, you talked about, okay, well, there are, right, single zone regions that still exist. Most of those for us are designed for DR purposes primarily, right? And so we have customers who are looking for that multi-region architecture, and then they can replicate data out of one region to another by using, right, those single zone regions. So we don't think that local zones really kind of addresses those scenarios.
So you're using the region with single zone, sorry to cut you off, the region with single zone as a paired region, so to fulfill the paired region.
It's primarily for disaster recovery purposes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, you brought up residency a few times, sovereignty residency. Is that the approach that Azure is taking to deliver on sovereignty, data sovereignty requirements, is by having more regions in more countries in order to be able to contain that data? Is that the approach?
Yeah, I think that there's both the data dimension of sovereignty, but also the control, right, and policy, and we see it from a as we see growing interest in public cloud capabilities, across government and regulated workloads, they have different customer expectations in terms of risk, security, privacy, and operations. And so we want customers in these scenarios, and we have customers in these scenarios leveraging the public cloud for a number of their workloads. But we want to make sure that we can actually add an additional layer of policy and auditing capabilities that address the specific public sector and government needs, particularly as they change, right, from region to region. And so that is the basis of our Microsoft Cloud for Sovereignty, right, that we announced earlier this year, I believe. It's about creating sovereign controls that really help apply best-in-class policy automation in order to simplify and orchestrate those sovereign controls for any given government workload. So platform encryption controls, managed HSMs, Key Vault, policies in general, and all of those things we're really working to codify in many ways in a concept we think of as sovereign landing zones. So think of it conceptually in some ways similar to the industry, right? Where we're trying to create that play. We're trying to create the controls and measures and then have them pulled together in sort of pre-canned solutions so that you can think about how they meet your needs from a governmental standpoint. And so it's both that underlying, data governance and control and residency and sovereign controls, but also the operations around it that become important.
Yeah. I want to take you back a little bit. At the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned hybrid and multi-cloud, and Microsoft does a really good job with hybrid. And Microsoft or Azure is one of the few cloud providers that is not shy about using the term multi-cloud, and I respect that a lot. Are there going to be other partnerships similar to Oracle from a multi-cloud perspective? Is anything that you can share that's not under NDA, or maybe it is under NDA that you can share with our listeners?
Well, I think when I think about multi-cloud, I go back to Azure ARC, right? And the work that we're doing with Azure ARC. And Azure ARC is really a way to extend Azure services either on premises or to multi-cloud, right? By, being able to extend the Azure control plane so that you have a common operational model, right? That you can apply governance, security, policy to. That also, right, through being able to attach ARC-enable Kubernetes clusters enables you to provide a platform that we can deploy Azure services to that then create a consistent model for app development as well as I said, that operations. And so when I think about multi-cloud, I think about ARC as the way to enable, right, those services and that consistency from a customer standpoint, from cloud to edge and multi-cloud. And so today, right, you can ARC enable VMs that are running in AWS, that are running in GCP. You can ARC enable Kubernetes clusters that are running, right, in either of those properties. And so, that is in many ways the way in which we're thinking about how do you combine the flexibility of where you want to consume different cloud, right, capabilities with the simplicity and the consistency of both the development model, but also the operational model.
Yeah. And, you mentioned the edge. So, today most customers are starting to think about the fact that they need an edge to cloud strategy. It's no longer just about the cloud, just on premises. It's also the edge, and the edge has multiple faces and facets. And so is Microsoft's recommendation for an end-to-end strategy just ARC, or is ARC part of a larger solution?
Well, I think ARC is the bridge that connects, right, Azure to either on-premises or multi-cloud environments. And then, it really is up to the customer to decide, what infrastructure of choice do they want to use, right? Of course, we have first-party solutions like Azure Stack, HCI, or even IoT, some of the things that we announced at Ignite. We're also, taking a lightweight version of Kubernetes to have it run on those IoT devices. Again, filling out the promise of this, think about, a common dev environment for you to be able to baseline against, and then flexibility to deploy, right, wherever you need. And so we want to, right, it really is about meeting the customer where they are, giving them the flexibility to leverage existing infrastructure, new infrastructure, assets they have on premises, assets they have in other clouds. But ARC becomes the glue in many ways, or that bridge that gives you that consistent development and governance.
Erin, I hear you're an avid buyer of NFTs and a pretty big collection. Is that correct?
So when the Kraken came to Seattle last year, I'm a huge hockey fan, I will tell you. I tried. They released these whole NFTs at the beginning of the whole Kraken journey, and I figured out how to set up an account, and I got in, and then somewhere along the way, it became all too complicated for me. So I think I'm just going to stick with hockey.
Speaking of NFTs, I'd love your personal, not a Microsoft opinion here, your personal opinion on the Metaverse. Microsoft has a lot of capabilities and applications there. What are your thoughts? Do you think we'll see an actual use case? I mean, the metaverse is now kind of a joke. It reminds me of the beginnings of cloud. Cloud, the term was also, everyone made fun of it at the beginning, and then it took a more serious use case, serious nature. Do you think the metaverse will ever have a serious application?
I think the jury is still out on that. I think it's still out on that. And, it's one of those places where there's a lot of complexity, right? Both in terms of everything from, even as we think about the whole world of AI and whatnot, the importance of the role of ethics and sort of just, how are we thinking about doing these things responsibly? And so, I do think within more of the business realm of things, we have the ability to I don't know if the word regulate is a bad word or not, but in some sense deploy and create that experience that people can trust. I think it goes back to that trust and security. And so I think how well it will evolve will be around our ability to create that level of trust and safety from a customer and a business standpoint.
Yeah, I love what NVIDIA is doing with their Omniverse, but I agree with you. I think the jury is definitely still out. I can talk to you for hours and throw many more questions, but unfortunately, that's all the time we have. I want to sincerely thank you for taking the time to chat with me today, and I'd love to have you back in 6 or 7 months to see what else is up with Azure Core.
It's a date. We'll schedule it. I'd love to be back.
Sounds good. Thank you for joining again. We'll see you soon.